There is a version of you that's lazy, doubtful, fearful, and makes excuses. That version is stealing your future, and today, we're going to kill it. Let me ask you a question that could change the rest of your life. Who are you, really? Are you the person with 1,000 ideas and zero action, the one who dreams at night but drowns in doubt by morning? The first and most critical step in reclaiming your power is to identify the enemy within, the weak self. And understand this. It does not wear a mask. It wears your face. It speaks with your voice. It hides behind rational-sounding thoughts, quietly sabotaging your ambition under the illusion of logic and caution. This version of you isn't loud. It's sly. It whispers. It's the part of you that says, maybe later when you know the time is now. It's the part that convinces you to scroll when you should be studying, to sleep in when you promise yourself you'd rise early, to settle when your spirit is screaming for more. The weak self thrives in delay, in indecision, in comfort. It will wrap itself in the language of reason. You need more time. You're not ready yet. You don't want to burn out. And though these may sound harmless, they are the words that have killed more dreams than failure ever could. It hides behind false humility, telling you to stay quiet when you should speak up, to keep your ideas to yourself because someone else already did it better. It disguises itself as empathy, whispering that you shouldn't push too hard because others might not understand. It's the internal saboteur that keeps you average, anxious, and afraid, and it is not your friend. It is not trying to protect you. It is trying to preserve the status quo, to keep you in a loop of inaction, where growth is impossible and greatness is out of reach. This weak self shows up every time you choose the path of least resistance, every time you accept good enough over great, every time you silence the fire in your gut in favor of pleasing people who don't have to live your life. It is the voice that convinces you to hide your talent, delay your start, and fear your own power. It uses your own memories against you, reminding you of your past failures, magnifying them, until you forget that you're not that person anymore. It clings to old identities, old stories of who you were, not who you are becoming, and it feeds on familiarity. Because if you rise, it dies, and it knows that. It lives in excuses. It breathes in hesitation. It thrives when you play small, when you shrink your goals to match your doubts instead of expanding your courage to match your potential. It has no vision, only limitations, no hunger, only habit. It convinces you that fear is a stop sign instead of a signal, that pain is a punishment instead of a passage, that failure is a reason to quit instead of proof that you're trying. It's the internal dialogue that sounds like, why not? When the real question should be, why not? It will use your circumstances, your past, your fatigue, even your loved ones as weapons. It will distract you with temporary pleasure to steal your permanent progress. It is always there. When you're tired, uncertain, and vulnerable, it waits. The weak self was not born overnight. It wasn't something you inherited from the stars or stitched into your DNA. No, it was built layer by layer, day after day, through tiny repeated choices that you told yourself didn't matter. It was forged in the seemingly harmless decisions you made again and again. The snooze button that bought you 10 more minutes but cost you your momentum. The promise to start tomorrow that never became today. The rationalization of just this one, that turned into a pattern. These weren't accidents, they were rehearsals for mediocrity, and repetition was the teacher. Every time you gave in to fear instead of stepping into challenge, every time you chose distraction over discipline, every time you said, I can't, when you could have said, I'll try, you were sculpting that weak self like an artist carves stone, not in bold strokes, but in quiet, consistent ones. You see, the mind adapts to whatever it's exposed to repeatedly, and if what it's exposed to is avoidance, delay, doubt, and compromise, and those things become your default operating system. You don't rise to the level of your potential, you sink to the level of your habits. And if your habits have been feeding weakness, that weakness becomes your identity. That version of you, the one who hesitates, who fears risk, who needs approval before action, didn't just appear, it was invited in. It was trained trained by days when comfort was chosen over challenge, trained by thoughts allowed to spiral unchecked, trained by a lifestyle built on reaction instead of intention. And the more you repeated those patterns, the more natural they became. Neuroscience has shown us that repetition rewires the brain. It doesn't care whether you're repeating strength or softness, courage or cowardice. It just builds what it's told to build. And when you feed it hesitation, when you program it with excuses, when you flood it with reasons to stay where you are, it obeys. It builds a life to match the input. The weak self isn't maintained by a single failure. It's maintained by consistency. Consistency in giving up, in talking yourself out of opportunities, in lowering your expectations so you don't have to feel the sting of disappointment. It's maintained every time you abandon your own word, every time you break a promise to yourself and pretend it doesn't matter. But it does, because repetition is ritual, and ritual becomes reality. Think back. How many times have you repeated a thought like, "I'm not good enough," until it started to feel like fact? How many times have you looked at your goals and said, "Maybe later," until later became never? How many times have you made comfort your king while discipline sat outside the gates? The weak self is not just a mindset, it's a result. It is the compound interest of poor decisions. It is the physical, emotional, and spiritual shape your life takes when you allow the wrong repetitions to go unchallenged. Real growth, the kind that shatters ceilings and rewrites your story, does not come peacefully. It is not a gentle evolution. It is a battle. A war fought not in the open, but behind your eyes and beneath your skin. It happens in silence, in solitude, in the thousands unseen moments when no one's watching and no applause is waiting. To grow, truly grow, is to declare war on the parts of yourself that have kept you small. It is a revolt against your comfort, a mutiny against your limitations, a rebellion against your own resistance. This is not poetic exaggeration. It is the raw truth, because the weak self will not step aside and let the stronger you emerge. It will fight, it will beg, it will bargain, it will scream for survival. You must become the warrior within your own mind, because every step forward will provoke the defenses of who you used to be. And those defenses are clever. They'll sound like logic. You don't have time. They'll sound like compassion. You need to rest. They'll sound like reason. Maybe this just isn't for you. But behind those words is a deeper fear. Fear of letting go of the familiar, fear of being seen trying and failing, fear of becoming someone so different that you no longer recognize yourself. That fear won't go away on its own. It must be fought. It must be confronted head on, not avoided. Growth does not come by avoiding fear. It comes by charging into it and breaking through. That means facing your internal resistance with the mindset of a soldier, not just willing to endure pain, but expecting it, welcoming it, using it. This warfare is not about punching walls or screaming affirmations. It's about confronting your patterns. It's about watching yourself choose weakness in real time and having the strength to override the impulse. It's about waking up and knowing the part of you that wants to quit will speak first, and preparing your counterattack. The battle happens in your habits. It happens when you're tempted to skip the workout, to eat what numbs you, to scroll instead of study, to gossip instead of grow. It happens when you're exhausted and the weak self tells you you've done enough, even though your soul knows you haven't. The internal war is won by awareness, radical, brutal, unwavering awareness. You must learn to hear your inner enemy and recognize its voice not as your own, but as a leftover echo of who you used to be. The more conscious you become of its strategies, the stronger you become in response. But the warfare goes deeper still, because as you begin to break old patterns and replace them with strength, a strange kind of grief emerges. You mourn the version of yourself you've lived with for so long, the one you protected, the one who kept you safe, the one who settled so you wouldn't have to be judged. Letting that version die isn't easy. There is pain in the evolution. There is loneliness in the elevation. There is sacrifice in the rise. You will lose things along the way, comfort, familiarity, people who only knew how to love the lesser version of you. You may lose approval, you may lose ease, you will most certainly lose illusions, but in return you gain clarity, power, a version of yourself that's not bound by fear, not swayed by doubt, not addicted to external validation. It is the fire that burns away excuses. In a world flooded with talk, strategy, analysis, and planning, action is the only thing that actually moves the needle. It is the weapon forged not in thought, but in movement. And without it, the strongest mindset is nothing more than a silent prayer. You can read every book, you can recite every affirmation, you can journal about your dreams until the ink runs dry, but if you do not act, none of it matters. The weak version of you thrives on thinking about doing. It loves the idea of progress, but not the price. And so it will constantly lead you in circles, from idea to doubt, from doubt to delay, from delay back to comfort. That cycle cannot be broken with more thinking. It is only shattered by doing. Action bypasses the noise. It leaps over doubt. It cuts through fear like a knife through fog. Because action doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't need to feel ready. It doesn't wait for the stars to align. It moves. It creates momentum. And once momentum begins, the weak self loses ground. Every time you act, you weaken the enemy within. Every time you move forward, when you feel afraid, when you feel unqualified, when you feel tired, you are chipping away at the old identity that kept you trapped. Action is not just physical, it is transformational. It reprograms the brain. It tells your nervous system, this is who I am now. And over time, that becomes truth. The reason so many people remain stuck is because they think they need clarity to act. But clarity doesn't come before action, it comes from it. When you act, you gain feedback. You learn what works, you learn what doesn't. You adapt, you evolve. But none of that is possible from the sideline. Watching the game is not the same as playing it. And real progress demands skin in the game. Action is also the most honest mirror. It reveals your true commitment. It shows whether your goals are desires or just decorations. Because anyone can say they want to change, anyone can say they want success, but only action proves it. Only action puts weight behind your words. Only action separates the dreamers from the doers. It doesn't have to be perfect. It never will be. Perfection is another mask the weak self wears, a delay tactic, a trap disguised as high standards. Waiting to act until everything is perfect is a trick the mind plays to keep you passive. You don't need the perfect plan, you need to move, to speak, to start, to fail forward, because motion, no matter how small, creates direction, and direction creates momentum. And the beauty of action is that it compounds. What begins as a small, almost invisible step builds into an unstoppable force if repeated. Action creates confidence. Confidence creates boldness. Boldness opens doors. But none of that sequence begins until movement is made. Action is how you build self-trust. Every time you follow through, you prove to yourself that your word has power, that your decisions matter, that your promises aren't empty. And with every act of discipline, every push through resistance, every strike of effort, you are not just making progress, you are sharpening your weapon. You are becoming it. Discomfort is not your enemy. It is not a punishment. It is not something to be avoided or numbed or prayed away. It is the doorway, the hidden entrance to every version of you that you've ever wanted to become. And yet, most people spend their entire lives building walls around it, labeling it as pain, as failure, as weakness, when in truth, discomfort is the signal, the invitation, the alarm clock screaming that something powerful is waiting just beyond the resistance you're feeling right now. Every breakthrough you've ever admired, every story of transformation, every act of greatness, it all began when someone stepped into discomfort while everyone else stepped away. Discomfort is the proving ground. It separates those who talk about change from those who become it. The weak self flinches at discomfort. It sees stress and retreats. It sees challenge and begins to negotiate. But the version of you that's destined for more recognizes discomfort as a necessary threshold, Growth does not live in routine. Strength is not built in ease. Character is not born where it's comfortable. It is forged in friction. It is shaped in the moments where everything inside you wants to quit, but you don't. When your body is tired, but your spirit says, keep going. That tension, that inner pull, that's where the old self cracks and the new self is born. But only if you stay long enough in the fire to allow the heat to change you. Discomfort exposes your limits. It peels back the masks. It shows you exactly where your strength ends, and it dares you to expand it. It brings up the thoughts you don't want to face, the fears you've buried, the lies you've told yourself for years. It doesn't whisper, it roars, and that's why it's so powerful. Because what makes you uncomfortable points directly to what must be faced, what must be healed, what must be overcome. There is no hiding in discomfort. And that's why the weak self avoids it, because in that space there are no excuses left. And the truth is, you've already survived discomfort before. You've endured heartbreak, disappointment, rejection, setbacks, and yet you're still here. Which means the fear isn't really about discomfort. The fear is about what it represents, change, the shedding of who you were, the death of comfort-based living, the stripping away of your false identity. Discomfort demands that you trade safety for significance, that you stop asking, will this hurt, and start asking, will this grow me? It's easy to stay in routines that don't challenge you. It's easy to stick with people who never demand more of you. It's easy to convince yourself that the pain of stretching isn't worth it. But deep down, you know what that leads to. You know what comfort without growth breeds. Numbness. A life that looks full from the outside but feels empty on the inside. And the longer you avoid discomfort, the smaller your world becomes. Until one day the walls close in and you realize you've been living not in freedom, but in a cage you built from your own avoidance. Discomfort is the toll you pay for elevation. It's the test you must pass to move forward. Not once, but constantly, in your health, in your relationships, in your discipline, in your work. The discomfort of early mornings, of difficult conversations, of setting boundaries, of saying no to temptation, of doing the work when no one is watching. These are the portals. And every time you step through one, you prove something, not to the world, but to yourself. You prove that you can evolve without being dragged, that you can choose growth without needing crisis to force it, that you are capable of walking straight into the storm and finding out you were the thunder all along. Change doesn't happen in one big cinematic moment. Transformation doesn't arrive with fireworks or applause. It isn't something you decide once and then coast on forever. No, the decision to become your strongest self is made daily, over and over again, and not when it's easy, but especially when it's not. It's made in the silence of the morning when the bed is warm and the world is still sleeping. It's made in the chaos of stress when your excuses scream louder than your purpose. It's made when no one's watching, when no one would blame you for quitting, when it would be so easy to justify doing less. It is in those exact moments that your true character is either sharpened or softened. And the deciding factor? A choice. One single choice. Repeated. The weak self is patient. It waits for the day you hesitate, the day you're tired, the day you feel uninspired or discouraged or overwhelmed. And on that day, it will come knocking, gently at first. You've earned a break. One day off won't hurt. You can pick it back up tomorrow. And most people open the door. They let the weak self back in with small compromises that feel harmless, but those compromises stack. They build, they multiply. And soon the path you were on becomes a memory, and you're back in the very place you swore you'd never return to. That's why this decision, the one to rise, to evolve, to fight, must be made daily, and not just once a day, but repeatedly throughout the day. Because life will keep offering you the option to retreat, to fold, to go numb. Every temptation, every distraction, every voice of doubt, they are all tests asking the same question. Will you choose the weak self, or will you choose the warrior? And don't fool yourself into thinking discipline is a feeling. It's not. It's not about motivation or inspiration. It's not about waiting for the stars to align or your energy to be perfect. It's about committing to a standard regardless of your emotional state. It's about choosing your mission over your mood, choosing your future over your feelings. Because the future doesn't care how you felt, only what you did. Every day you wake up, you are standing at a crossroads. One road leads to who you've always been, predictable, reactive, stuck. The other leads to who you're becoming, sharpened, intentional, relentless. But you don't get to walk both. You must choose. And what makes it hard is that the difference between the roads is subtle. The wrong one feels easier, feels safer, feels more familiar, but comfort is deceptive. Doesn't ask for much up front, but it takes everything from you over time. You must make the decision daily to speak with power, to move with urgency, to act with precision, to align your habits with your highest standard, not your lowest craving. And it will not be convenient. It will not always feel rewarding in the moment. But that's the price of greatness. Not the loud moments, but the consistent, quiet ones, where you keep choosing to stand up instead of shrink back. The weak version of you thrives in inconsistency. It waits for the cracks. It looks for emotional loopholes. It loves when you commit only on the good days because it knows it can own you on the bad ones. That's why your strength must be renewed every single day through action, through intention, through choice. That's what builds identity, not who you say you are, but what you repeatedly prove when life stops being ideal. Some days you'll feel unstoppable. Other days you'll feel like you're dragging yourself forward with nothing but willpower and grit. But that's the point. That's the training. Every time you make the decision to keep going, even when you're not in the mood, you're not just moving forward, you're building the muscle of self-command. You're teaching yourself that you don't just have potential, you have power. But that power only becomes real when it's exercised, and it can only be exercised when you make the decision again and again, without ceremony, without applause, without permission.